crystal chandeliers of the grand imperial ballroom felt like mocking spotlights as the crowd's laughter swelled. Lila stood frozen, her engagement ring reflecting a future that had just been incinerated by Lucas's cruel, public dismissal. Every whisper from the onlookers felt like a physical blow. She didn't stay for the pity, she ran. Tearing through the velvet curtains and into the sprawling marble lobby, Lila was a blur of white silk and smeared mascara. She was desperate to disappear, blinded by a tsunami of grief, until she slammed into a wall of solid muscle and expensive cologne. Steady, iron-tight hands caught her by the shoulders. Lila looked up, gasping into the cold, obsidian eyes of Wook. He was the city's shadow king, a man who didn't believe in accidents. In that moment, the hum of the hotel lobby faded into a deadly silence. Lila had escaped a heartbreak, but she had just fallen into the hands of a predator. And Wook, he wasn't planning on letting his new prize go. Subscribe to unlock the full saga. The champagne in Lila's glass was still bubbling, oblivious to the fact that her life had just ended.
To
To
Lila.
Lila, Lucas said, raising his glass to the room of 300 people. His smile was charming, the same one that had convinced her to say yes 6 months ago. The woman who thought a girl from the South Side could actually handle a seat at my family's table. A few ripples of laughter broke the silence. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. "Lucas, what are you doing?" she whispered. "I'm doing us both a favor, darling," he said, his voice dropping the facade. "The engagement is off. You were a fun project, but my father needs me to marry into a family that actually brings something to the bank, not just a pretty face and a resume from a state college." The room erupted in hushed gossiping. Lucas turned his back on her, clinking glasses with his friends as if she had already ceased to exist. Lila stood paralyzed for 3 seconds, 3 seconds that felt like an eternity under the judgmental gaze of the elite. Then she turned and bolted. The heavy doors of the ballroom felt like the exit to a prison. She didn't grab her coat. She didn't grab her purse. She just ran, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor, her heart hammering a rhythm of pure, unadulterated betrayal. The lobby of the Grand Imperial was a vast expanse of gold leaf and predatory shadows. Lila didn't see the black-suited men standing near the private elevator. She didn't see the way the air in the room seemed to chill as a tall, imposing figure stepped into her path. Thud. The impact was enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She stumbled back, her heels skidding on the polished floor, but before she could fall, two large hands clamped onto her upper arms. They weren't gentle, but they were steady, unshakable. Lila looked up, her breath hitching. The man standing over her was a titan. His suit was charcoal, his hair perfectly slicked back, but it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were dark, piercing, and entirely devoid of warmth. "You're in a hurry," the man said. His voice was a low, melodic growl that vibrated in her chest. "I'm sorry," Lila choked out, a fresh sob escaping her. "Please let me go." The man didn't move. He looked over her head toward the ballroom, where the sounds of the party were still audible. Then he looked back at her, at the smeared makeup, the trembling lips, and the way she clutched her chest as if she were trying to hold her heart together. "You're bleeding," he noted, his gaze dropping to where she had scraped her arm against his cufflinks. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "In my world," Wook said, his grip tightening just a fraction, "everything matters." Lila tried to pull away, but it was like trying to move a mountain. "Please, I just want to go home." "You don't have a car. You don't have a coat. And according to the noise coming from that room, you don't have a fiancé anymore," Wook said calmly. Lila flinched. How did he know? She looked at the men standing behind him, 4 of them all dressed in black, their hands folded in front of them with military precision. These weren't hotel security. These were soldiers. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Wook," one of the men behind him murmured, a warning in his tone. Wook ignored his subordinate. He reached out with one hand, his thumb catching a stray tear on Lila's cheek. His skin was warm, a startling contrast to his cold expression. The man you should be afraid of, but tonight I think I'm the only one who can get you out of here without the paparazzi catching your breakdown. Outside, the flashes of cameras began to pop against the glass doors. Lucas's PR team had wasted no time. The scandal was already live. Lila looked at the cameras, then back at the dark, dangerous man in front of her. "Choice is yours, Lila," he said, using her name for the first time. "The wolves outside or the lion in front of you?" She chose the lion. Wook swept her through a side exit into a waiting black SUV before the first reporter could shout her name. The interior of the car smelled of expensive leather and cedarwood. Lila huddled against the door, her silk dress stained and ruined. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice small. Wook sat opposite her, his long legs crossed. He was watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. "Because Lucas Vane is a fool. He threw away a diamond to impress a bunch of glass gutters. And because I happen to need something that only someone close to the Vane family can provide." Lila's
I don't
heart
have
sank.
anything. He
"I don't
took it
have
all. He
anything.
told me
He
I
took
was
it all.
nothing.
He told me I was nothing." Wook turned his head slowly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "He's a liar. You're the bridge to his father's accounts. You're the one who knows his passwords, his habits, his weaknesses." "I won't help you hurt him," Lila said, though her voice lacked conviction. "He already destroyed you, Lila," Wook said, his voice dropping to a dangerous silkiness. "I'm just offering to help you pick up the pieces, but I keep what I mend." The SUV pulled into a private underground garage, and an elevator whisked them straight to the top floor of the tallest building in the city. The penthouse was a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel, overlooking the skyline like an observer's throne. "This is your room," Wook said, gesturing to a door down a long hallway. "There are clothes in the closet. A doctor will be here in 10 minutes to look at your arm." Lila looked around the vast, cold space. It was beautiful, but it felt like a fortress. "Am I a prisoner?" Wook walked toward her, stopping only inches away. He was so tall she had to crane her neck to see him. He reached out, tilting her chin up with his finger. "You're a guest," he corrected. "For as long as it takes for me to decide what to do with you. Sleep, Lila. Tomorrow your old life is officially dead. We'll see what grows in the shadows." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of his empire. Lila touched her arm where his cufflinks had scratched her. The pain was sharp, but for the first time in hours, the soul-crushing weight of Lucas's betrayal was being replaced by a new, terrifying spark of survival. The air in the penthouse was thick with the scent of rain and expensive cologne, a silent reminder that Lila was no longer in control of her own fate. Lila woke to the sound of a silk curtain being drawn back. Sunlight flooded the room, harsh and unforgiving against the remnants of her smeared mascara. For a moment, she forgot. Then the weight of Lucas's cruelty crashed back into her chest. A woman in a crisp black uniform stood at the foot of the bed. "Master Wook
Master
is
Wall is
waiting for
waiting for
you
you
in
in
the
the dining
dining
hall.
hall. There is a selection of clothes in the dressing room. Please be ready in 15 minutes." Lila looked at the dressing room. It was larger than her entire apartment back in the South Side. Inside, rows of designer dresses, tailored slacks, and silk blouses hung like a curated museum exhibit. She chose a simple, high-necked black dress that felt more like armor than fashion. When she entered the dining hall, Wook was seated at the head of a mahogany table, a tablet in one hand and a black coffee in the other. He didn't look up immediately, but the air in the room shifted the moment she stepped inside. "You look better in black than in bridal white," he said, his voice a low vibration. "White is for the innocent, and you've just realized the world isn't an innocent place, haven't you?" Lila pulled out a chair, her hands trembling. "I want to go home, Wook. I need to get my things from Lucas's penthouse." Wook finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "You have no home there. Lucas had your locks changed 2 hours ago. Your
Ago.
belongings are currently
Your
being
belongings are
burned in a
currently being
dumpster
burned in a
behind the
dumpster by Vane
Vane
Estate. I
estate.
believe he called it cleansing the
I
palace.
believe he called it cleansing the palate. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. Everything, my mother's photos, my journals. Everything, Wook confirmed. He slid a thin manila folder across the table toward her. Except for what you were carrying in that small clutch when you ran. The flash drive. The one with the property of Vane Holdings encryption. Lila froze. She had forgotten. In her haste to leave the gala, she had grabbed her clutch, which contained a drive Lucas had asked her to hold earlier that evening. He told her it was a backup for his speech. I didn't know what was on it, she whispered. It's a ledger, Lila. A digital footprint of every bribe, every offshore account, and every dirty handshake the Vane family has made in the last decade. Wook leaned forward, his presence overwhelming the space between them. Lucas didn't just dump you because you were from the South Side. He dumped you because he realized he'd handed the keys to his father's kingdom to a woman he was about to betray. He's going to come for it, Lila realized, her voice shaking. He's already looking, Wook said, a dark, predatory smile touching his lips. Which makes you the most dangerous woman in this city and the most hunted. I can't stay here, Lila said, standing up so quickly her chair screeched against the floor. I'll give you the drive, just let me go. Wook stood too, his height casting a long shadow over her. He walked around the table, stopping until he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. If you walk out those doors, you won't make it 2 blocks before one of Lucas's security teams finds you. They won't be as polite as I am, Lila. He reached out, his fingers grazing the pulse point at her throat. It was hammering like a trapped bird. You're going to stay. You're going to learn how to walk, talk, and look like you belong at my side. If the city thinks you're mine, they won't dare touch you. And if I refuse to be your puppet? Wook's grip tightened slightly, not enough to hurt but enough to command. Then you're just another casualty of the Vane family. I don't save people, Lila. I invest in them. Right now, you're my most valuable asset. He called for his lead enforcer, a grim-faced man named Han. Take her to the gym. See if she has any fire left in her or if Lucas truly broke her. The next 3 days were a blur of exhaustion. Wook didn't coddle her. He watched from the balcony of the private gym as Han pushed her through defensive drills. Lila's muscles ached, her feet bled, and her heart felt like a hollow shell. Every time she felt like collapsing, she looked up and saw Wook watching her. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was a constant, heavy weight. On the 4th evening, she snapped. Is this what you wanted? She yelled, throwing a training pad at the glass railing. To watch me struggle, to see how much more I can take. Wook descended the stairs slowly, his footsteps rhythmic and haunting. He didn't stop until he was inches away. I want to see you get angry, Lila. Sadness is a
Sadness is a
luxury you
luxury you
can't
can't afford.
afford. Anger,
Anger?
anger will
Anger will
keep
keep
you
you alive.
alive. He grabbed her wrists, pulling her flush against his chest. The contact was electric, a sudden, violent spark that neither of them expected. Lila's breath hitched. For a second, the anger vanished, replaced by a terrifying, magnetic pull toward the man who held her captive. Wook didn't pull away. His dark eyes searched hers, dropping briefly to her lips before returning to her gaze. Lucas is hosting a press conference tonight, he whispered, his voice dangerously low. He's going to announce his new engagement to a senator's daughter. He's going to tell the world you were unstable, that you stole from him. Lila's eyes narrowed, the fire Wook had been looking for finally igniting. He's lying. I know, Wook said. He released her wrists and stepped back, though the air between them remained charged. So, we're going to crash the party. You're going to walk into that room on my arm. You're going to show him that you didn't just survive his betrayal, you leveled up. Why help me humiliate him? Lila asked. Wook straightened his tie, the cold mask returning to his face. Because I want him to know that what was his is now mine, and because I enjoy watching empires fall. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Wear the red dress, Lila. I want them to see the blood on your hands before you even touch them." The stage is set for a high-stakes confrontation. Lila is no longer the girl who ran crying from the ballroom. She is a woman backed by the most dangerous man in the city. The dress Wook chose for her was a masterpiece of defiance. It was a deep, blood-red silk that clung to every curve, with a slit that climbed dangerously high up her thigh. As Lila looked at herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The puffiness in her eyes had been replaced by a sharp, winged liner. Her vulnerability was hidden under a layer of cold glamour. Wook appeared in the reflection behind her. He wore a black-on-black tuxedo, looking every bit the dark prince he was. He didn't say she looked beautiful. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace, a heavy teardrop diamond on a platinum chain. He stepped close, his breath warm against her ear as he fastened the clasp. His fingers lingered on the skin of her neck, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Tonight you don't speak unless I look at you," Wook commanded softly. "You don't look at Lucas, you look at me. Let him wonder what you've told me. Let him wonder why you aren't afraid." "I am afraid," Lila whispered, her hand going to the diamond at her throat. "Good," Wook murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Fear makes you sharp, just don't let them see it." The Vane estate was glowing with artificial light, teeming with the city's elite and a swarm of hungry reporters. Lucas stood on the grand staircase, his arm wrapped around a blonde woman in a pale blue gown, the senator's daughter. He was mid-sentence, laughing at a joke, when the heavy oak doors swung open. The room went silent. It wasn't just a pause, it was a rhythmic stop, as if the heart of the party had skipped a beat. Lila walked in, her heels clicking like a countdown on the marble. But it was the man whose arm she was draped over that caused the real panic. The name Wook rippled through the crowd in terrified whispers. The Shadow King didn't do galas, he didn't do public appearances, and he certainly didn't do dates. Lucas's face turned a sickly shade of gray. His grip on his new fiancé tightened so hard she flinched. "Lila," Lucas stammered, his voice cracking through the microphone. Wook didn't stop until they were at the foot of the stairs, looking up at the man who had discarded her like trash. "Mr. Vane," Wook said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I believe you dropped something valuable. I'm here to thank you for your carelessness." The silence was broken by the frantic clicking of cameras. Lila felt 100 eyes on her, but she kept her gaze locked on Wook, just as he had ordered. She could see the vein pulsing in Lucas's neck, a sign of his mounting rage. "She's a thief, Wook," Lucas hissed, stepping down a stair, trying to regain his dominance. "I don't know what lies she told you, but she stole private property from my family. You're harboring a criminal." Wook let out a low, dry chuckle that made the hair on Lila's neck stand up. He pulled Lila closer, his hand splayed possessively across the small of her back. "Stole," Wook echoed. "Everything Lila has belongs to me now. If you have a grievance, you can file it with my associates. But I should warn you, Lucas, my associates don't use paperwork, they use lead." The threat was blatant. The senator, standing nearby, looked ready to faint. Lucas opened his mouth to retort, but Wook leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the three of them could hear. "I have the ledger, Lucas. Every offshore account, every bribe. One word from me and your father spends the rest of his life in a cage. Now smile for the cameras. It's your engagement party after all." The tension was so thick it felt like it might combust. Lucas was shaking, his eyes darting between Lila and the reporters. He knew he was trapped. If he attacked her now, Wook would ruin his family. If he let her go, he lost his leverage. "We're leaving," Wook announced to the room. As they turned to go, Lila couldn't resist. She stopped and looked back at Lucas. For months, she had lived for his approval. Now, seeing him small and terrified, she felt a wave of cold clarity. "The ring was fake, Lucas," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Just like you." They walked out of the estate and into the cool night air. The moment the car doors closed, the adrenaline that had been propping Lila up vanished. She began to shake violently. Wook didn't offer words of comfort. Instead, he pulled her into his lap, wrapping his massive arms around her, holding her together as she finally let out the breath she'd been holding since the night of the breakup. For the first time, his touch didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a sanctuary. Back at the penthouse, the air had changed. The pretense of investment and assets was starting to fray. Wook poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and handed one to Lila. She noticed his knuckles were bruised. He must have taken out his frustration on a punching bag before they left. "You did well tonight," he said, watching her over the rim of his glass. "What happens now?" Lila asked. "You have the ledger, you humiliated Lucas. Do you still need me?" Wook walked toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. He set his glass down on the mantel and reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "The ledger was the reason I brought you here," he admitted, his voice dropping to a low, husky growl. "But it's not the reason I'm keeping you here." Lila's heart raced. "Wook, you're a fire I didn't expect to start, Lila, and I've never been good at putting fires out." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Lucas wants you back because he's afraid. I want you here because I've never seen anything as beautiful as you standing in the middle of a wreckage." The distance between them vanished as he captured her lips in a kiss that was both a claim and a confession. It wasn't the gentle kiss of a fiancé. It was the hungry, possessive kiss of a man who took what he wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in his way. The heat between Lila and Wook is no longer a spark, it's an inferno. But in the shadows of the underworld, every moment of peace is a precursor to a storm. The kiss was a collision of 2 worlds. Lila's hands, once trembling with fear, now tangled in the silk of Wook's tie, pulling him closer as if he were the only solid thing in a crumbling universe. Wook's possessiveness wasn't just a show for the cameras anymore. It was raw, hungry, and focused entirely on her. He lifted her easily, her red silk dress bunching against his thighs as he carried her toward the expansive master suite. He set her down on the edge of the obsidian-colored silk sheets, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "You can still
You can
walk
still
away,
walk away,
Lila,"
Lila.
he rasped, his voice a low, dangerous warning. "If you cross this line, there is no going back to the life you knew. You become part of the shadow." Lila reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The girl who wanted a white picket fence was dead. The woman who survived the gala wanted the man who made her feel powerful. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. Wook didn't need to be told twice. He claimed her with a fierce intensity, his touch marking her in ways Lucas never could. It wasn't just a physical act, it was an exchange of souls in the dark. Morning arrived with a cold, gray light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lila lay wrapped in the heavy duvet, watching Wook as he stood by the window, already dressed in a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate tattoos snaking up his forearms. "Lucas didn't go home last night," Wook said, not turning around. Lila sat up, the silk sheet slipping. "Where did he go?" "To the docks, to a warehouse owned by the Petrov Syndicate." Wook turned, his face unreadable. "He's desperate, Lila. He offered them the vein shipping routes in exchange for your recovery and my head on a platter." Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He'd align himself with the Russian mob just to save his own ego. "He'd align himself with the devil to stop me from releasing that ledger," Wook corrected. He walked to the bed, leaning down to press a lingering, possessive kiss to her forehead. "I have to handle this. You stay here. Don't leave the penthouse. My men are at every door." The day was agonizingly slow. Lila paced the penthouse, feeling the walls close in. She was safe, yes, but she was a prize in a war she hadn't started. She spent hours looking at the digital ledger on Wook's desk, rows of names, dates, and amounts that proved Luca's was even more monstrous than she'd realized. Around 4 p.m., the power in the building flickered. Lila's heart leaped into her throat. She ran to the door, but it was locked from the outside. "Han!" she shouted, calling for Wook's lead enforcer. "Silence!" A heavy thud sounded in the hallway, followed by the muffled scuffle of boots. Lila backed away from the door, her eyes searching the room for a weapon. She grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the bar, her knuckles white. The lock clicked. The door swung open. It wasn't Wook. It wasn't Han. It was Lucas, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. "Did you really think
Did you
he could
think
keep
he
you
could
from
keep
me?"
you away from me?
Lucas sneered, stepping into the room. Behind him stood two men Lila didn't recognize, men with cold eyes and Russian accents. "Get out, Lucas," Lila said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Wook will kill you for this." "Wook is currently busy defending his shipments at the harbor," Lucas laughed, a jagged, unstable sound. "He fell for the bait. He thinks the threat is out there, but I knew you'd be here, tucked away like his favorite little toy." He stepped closer, his gaze raking over her. "You look different, Lila. Expensive. Did he buy you, or did you just sell yourself to the highest bidder?" Smack. Lila didn't think, she just swung. Her palm connected with Lucas's cheek, the force of it stinging her hand. Lucas's head snapped to the side, and for a second the room was deathly quiet. When he looked back at her, his expression was murderous. He grabbed her by the hair, dragging her toward the door. "You're coming with me. You're going to tell the police you were kidnapped, and then you're going to give me that drive, or I'll let these gentlemen have their turn with you." Lila fought, kicking and clawing, but the two Russian enforcers grabbed her arms, pinning her. They dragged her toward the private elevator, Lucas following behind, clutching the manila folder he'd snatched from the desk. "Wait," Lila gasped as they reached the garage. "Lucas, look at the folder." Lucas stopped, frowning. He opened it, his face turning pale. The folder was empty. "The drive isn't there," Lila lied, her mind racing. "Wook has it on him, at the docks. If you want it, you have to go to him." She knew she was leading them into a trap, but it was her only chance. Lucas gripped her chin, his nails digging into her skin. "Then we're going to the docks. If you're lying to me, Lila, I won't just dump you this time. I'll make sure no one ever finds you." As they threw her into the back of a black van, Lila looked up at the penthouse one last time. She had entered Wook's world as a victim. She was leaving it as a gambler, betting her life on the man who ruled the shadows. The smell of salt air and rotting wood filled the van as they reached the industrial sector. Lila knew this was where the city's heart stopped beating and its dark veins took over. The van screeched to a halt in front of Warehouse 14. Lucas dragged Lila out by her arm, his grip bruising and desperate. The docks were eerily quiet, the moonlight reflecting off the black, oily water of the harbor. "Wook," Lucas screamed into the darkness, his voice cracking. "I know you're here. I have your little South Side trophy." From the shadows of a towering shipping container, a silhouette emerged. Wook stepped into the light, looking remarkably calm for a man whose empire was under siege. He was alone, his hands tucked casually into his pockets, but the air around him hummed with lethal intent. "You're late, Lucas," Wook said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "I expected you 10 minutes ago." "Shut up," Lucas shoved Lila forward, though he kept his arm hooked around her neck. "Give me the drive, now, or I swear to God I'll end this right here." Wook's eyes shifted to Lila. He didn't look worried, he looked at her with a strange, dark pride. "Lila," he called out softly, "do you remember what I told you about anger?" Lila felt the cold metal of Lucas's pocket knife against her ribs, but she also felt the weight of the small, sharp object she'd managed to palm from the van's floor, a discarded metal pen. "I remember," she whispered. "Good." Wook reached into his inner pocket and held up a silver flash drive. Here it is, Lucas. Everything you're afraid of. Your father's sins, your family's debt, and the proof that you've been skimming from the Petrovs. The Russian enforcers behind Lucas stiffened. They hadn't known about the skimming. He's lying, Lucas yelled, his eyes darting to the Russians. Check the drive then, Wook challenged, tossing the silver object into the air. As the drive arched through the sky, Lucas's greed overrode his caution. For a split second, his grip on Lila loosened as he reached out to catch the drive. In that heartbeat, Lila drove the metal pen into Lucas's thigh with every ounce of strength she possessed. Lucas screamed, collapsing to one knee. Lila didn't wait. She dove to the side, rolling behind a stack of wooden pallets just as the first shot rang out. The silence of the docks exploded. Wook moved like a blur of shadow. He wasn't alone. Han and a dozen men appeared from the containers, their suppressed weapons coughing in the night. The Russian enforcers, realizing Lucas had played them, turned their guns on him first. "No, wait," Lucas cried, clutching his bleeding leg. A bullet grazed the concrete inches from his head. Lila watched from her cover, her heart hammering. She saw Wook systematically dismantle the threat, his movements precise and cold. He wasn't just a boss, he was a storm. When the smoke cleared, the Petrov men were down or fleeing into the night. Lucas was left huddled on the ground, sobbing, his expensive suit ruined and his dignity gone forever. Wook walked over to Lucas, his boots clicking on the wet pavement. He looked down at the man who had started it all with a look of pure disgust. "You didn't just lose a fiancé, Lucas," Wook said, leaning down. "You lost your family name. The Petrovs know you robbed them. The police have the ledger. And I have the only thing you ever truly cared about." Wook turned toward the pallets. "Lila, come here." Lila stepped out from the shadows. Her dress was torn, her hair was a mess, and her skin was stained with grease and Lucas's blood. She looked at Lucas, the man she once thought she loved, and felt absolutely nothing. "He's yours," Wook said, handing her a heavy black handgun. "For the humiliation at the gala, for the dumpster, for tonight, finish it." Lila looked at the gun, then at Lucas's terrified face. She took the weapon, its weight surprising her. She pointed it at him, and for a moment Lucas actually whimpered. Then she engaged the safety and handed the gun back to Wook. "No," Lila said, her voice sounding like steel. "Killing him is too easy. Let him live with nothing. Let him see me every time he looks at the headlines. That's a much better prison." 2 weeks later. The penthouse was quiet, the city lights below shimmering like a sea of diamonds. Lila stood on the balcony, a glass of wine in her hand. The news was filled with the Vane family's downfall, arrests, bankruptcy, and a scandal that would never be forgotten. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Wook pressed his face into the crook of her neck, his heartbeat steady against her back. "The South Side girl has become the talk of the town," Wook murmured. "The woman who brought down a dynasty." "I had a little help," Lila said, leaning back into him. "You had the fire," he corrected. "I just gave you the match." He turned her around, his dark eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. He reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out a flash drive or a weapon. He pulled out a ring, not the delicate, fragile diamond Lucas had given her, but a thick gold band set with a deep, blood-red ruby. "This isn't a project, Lila, and it's not an investment." He slid the ring onto her finger. "It's a crown. Are you ready to rule the shadows with me?" Lila looked at the ruby, then up at the king of the city. She didn't need a white wedding or a public toast. She had found a man who saw her strength in the dark. "I've always preferred the shadows anyway," she whispered. As he pulled her into a kiss, the city below continued to churn. But in the penthouse above the world, the runaway bride had finally found her throne. Lila's journey from a heartbroken runaway to the queen of Wook's empire has come to an end. Or is it just the beginning? In a world where loyalty is rarer than gold, she found her strength in the darkest of places. But now we want to hear from you. Which moment kept you on the edge of your seat? Was it the satisfaction of Lila's cold revenge at the docks? The electric tension of that first night in the penthouse? Or the moment Wook chose a crown over a contract? Drop a comment below with your favorite chapter or line. We read every single one of them, and your feedback helps decide what kind of bad boy or mafia boss romance we bring to you next. Don't miss the next thrill. If you loved this dark romance, make sure you don't get left in the shadows. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to be the first to know when our next story drops. Give this story a like if you think Lucas got exactly what he deserved.